Hi everyone. We're
Hello.
we're so excited to be here with you today on this gorgeous Saturday, at least here in Atlanta. It's beautiful. How about you? Where you are, Ismay?
I am in Connecticut and it is also beautiful, a little cold, but sunny. So I'm glad it's not raining.
So I am the author of Salty Bittersweet. It is a YA foodie rom-com. It's a lot of fun. It's a great light read if you want something fun to read now while you're kind of stuck at home and on the weekends and getting ready for hopefully we'll have a nice summer. And Ismay, how about your book? This train
Yeah,
is
so
being
I'm East May Williams. Oh, thank you.
held.
This train is being held as my second book. It just came out in February. People have I didn't set out to do this, but a lot of people have said it's like a modern retelling of West Side Story. But it's about two teens who meet on the subways of New York City, which would be extremely rare to happen right now. But they're both the difference is they're both Latinos. So that's the twist. So thank you everybody for joining us. If you want to give a shout out where you're calling from or tuning in from, I see from
Yes.
Hudson Valley, Washington is windy.
Washington, that is awesome. So let's get started because we have a ton of stuff to cover that we prepared an awesome presentation for you guys. And as we're doing the presentation, please just put your questions on the chat and we're going to try to answer as many questions as possible.
Yeah.
So here we go. We're just going to start with our slides. Oh, and we also want to do a poll. I'm going to publish the poll. We want to know what grades you guys are in. And let's just get started with the presentation. Okay, so four facets of a great story. And this is from The Breakout Novelist by Donald Mass, which is a great resource book on writing fiction. So one of the facets is larger than life characters. So characters that are memorable, that pop off the page, that kind of stick with you like long after you've read the story or you finished the book. And we're gonna do some go into characterization and do some character exercises in a little bit. And then the second facet is what happens to characters in the course of the story is unusual, dramatic, and meaningful. So for the reader, that means that it changes your perspective on the world or it
Mhm.
changes a view of something. What does that mean for you, Ismay?
Um, Basically I mean I agree. I was going to say before we get into all of this, we have this presentation where we've tried to assimilate a lot of information, sort of pearls of wisdom about writing in general. A lot of it is coming from books. I will say though that most of my writing education did not come from reading books about how to write. It came from attending writing conferences and hearing other published authors talk about their methods and how they got published and how they plot a story, whether they start their story with the plot or with the characters, things like that. So all of that is incorporated into this. And so we hope that it's a good resource for you guys. But, I would say, Mara and I were talking before, um, there are many different ways to write a story. Some stories start with a plot, like you have a really good idea, like, oh my gosh, what if there's a pandemic and it hit New York City? Or, something like that. Other people, including me, start with the character. So I'm character driven. I think of a character and the conflict of the character, and then I sort of build what happens to them around that conflict. But I want to just point out, so I think for a lot of people, and you could do this yourself as well, think about stories that are memorable to you or
Yeah.
books that you've read that stick with you. What was it about that story? Was it the
And characters.
character?
Yeah.
It's usually the character. So character is really, really important.
Yes, and so basically, I mean, these are things that once you see this list, like it alters the way that you see a good story alters the way that you see the world. Like when you think of books that you absolutely love, it's because it changed something in you. It changed the way that you thought about a certain thing, and that is because there is purpose. So that is the fourth element: is purpose to the prose. So you are writing the story or this book because you're passionate about something that you want the world to know. And that is one of the most important elements when you're trying to figure out what you're going to write something that you love, write something that is meaningful to you, that you want to share with the world. Like, for example, Salty Bittersweet is about our relationship with food and how food is love. I am so passionate about giving of myself to others through creating a wonderful meal, and I wanted to put that in the book as it relates to family relations and relationships and family interactions. So that was my purpose for that book. What was your purpose with writing This Train Has Been Held, Ismail?
I would say I wanted to write a romance. I love romance. My first book was not a romance. And this one I said, I really want to try my hand at a romance. And, but I wanted it to deal with very deep topics. So like the purpose to the prose would be sort of the theme. Like, what is your main theme? I don't like to use the word lesson because it sounds like you're trying to preach to your readers, which you're really not. You're trying to entertain. That's ultimately what you're doing. You want to entertain somebody, but beyond entertaining, you want to give them something that they keep with them, that they still think about. And so it's helpful to have a strong character, have interesting things happen in that character, and also to carry a theme through. So I would say that the theme of This Train Is Being Held is really about expectations. I was thinking about, what I still face as an adult woman, how it really irritates me when people take one look at me and they make assumptions of me based on my short stature or whether I'm wearing lipstick or so I put that into the characters, sort of, you have a wealthy Upper East Side private school girl who's tall and blonde and very good looking, and she wants to be a dancer, and everybody sort of treats her like that. And she's, dismissed, and they think that she's maybe snotty or privileged, which she is. But, she's a good person. And then Alex is a person of color. He's Dominican American. He really wants to be a baseball player, and he looks like he's a baseball player. And so a lot of people look at him and they make assumptions about him. And so it's just expectations, but not even, it's like society and also expectations from your family. Like, what do your parents expect you to do? Like, so Issa wants to be a dancer, but her mother thinks that's unacceptable. She wants her daughter to be a doctor. And Alex's father wants him to be a baseball player. And if Alex wants to do something else, that's not really acceptable to the father. And then also expectations of your friends, like who you should be dating or who you shouldn't be. And then your own expectations, like what do you envision for yourself? So I think expectations is definitely one of the big themes, one of the central themes that I tried to bring forward. And
yeah, so I would say like the big theme on Isma's book is like define expectations from your family, society, and even from yourself. And then one of the big themes in my book is finding success on your own terms. Like that was for me the big thing that other than food is love, that I wanted to the message that I wanted to carry. So let's move on to how do we find, once you have an idea, you want to write a great story, you're passionate about what you want to write it, how do you come up with the premise for the story? So when coming up with a premise, these are four key things to just kind of keep in mind to help you and guide you how to flesh out just that thought of like, oh, I want to write a book about a girl who falls in love or a boy who falls in love, and take that to, okay, this is how that idea is going to turn into a story or a book. So the first element is plausibility. Could this really happen, right? Like, is this something that could happen, whether if it's contemporary, whether it could happen in a world, or if it's fantasy, whether it could happen in the world that you have created. The second point, it's inherent conflict, and Isma can talk a lot about inherent conflict because it was one of the things that we touched on when we were kind of getting ready.
So I think I mentioned before, I usually start with the characters. For me, I need to have a very strong sense of who my characters are and what are their own conflicts. And I can talk about it now, or we can wait till we get to characters. But people, and one of the I think Kate Messner, some famous author, said this at some point at some writers conference, that your character, especially your protagonist, but this is true for all characters, not just your protagonist, which is another point. You have to make sure all of your, B-listed characters also have conflicts. What does your character want versus what does your character need? So a good example, and then I did read this in a book that was recommended to me. This author gave an example of, okay, so let's say your character is a 35-year-old woman who has severe social phobia. She is terrified of other people. She doesn't like going outside her apartment. What she wants to do is just stay in her apartment all the time, have her food delivered, and never go outside. But then she wakes up one morning and her toilet is broken. So what she needs to do is the plumber has to come into the house. The plumber has to come and has to fix the toilet. She needs to do that, but obviously that is in direct conflict to her want. So,
so the more
there's your conflict, right?
Yes, the inherent conflict means that what your character wants and what their need are like at opposites. So right there's inherent conflict, and there's the seeds for an awesome story with a lot of tension, because your character is going to it's going to be it's always going to they're always going to try to go against of what the universe is trying to get them to learn, or what they need to learn for themselves. So another point is originality. Is this a previously unexplored angle to a familiar story? So a great example of this is retellings. There's so many different retells of like Cinderella stories, of Romeo and Juliet, as long as whatever you're bringing to the table is original. Yes, like Isthmus.
But I would also say it's very funny. I was looking back over my notes from all these conferences, these writers' conferences I went to, and I found a reference to a book. This was back in 2012, and this book was published in 2010. And it sounded very, it had some similarities. It was like rich girl meets like, gang banger boy. Alex is not a gang banger, but it's like a rich white girl and a Latino boy in Chicago. And then I was like, oh my God, that's like the same book as mine. I can't believe that. But then I was like, no, wait. My book is different for lots of reasons. But also the point is that they're both actually Latinos. So you have like the rich versus the poor, sort of forbidden love, crossing class, but they're both Latinos. And so that's sort of an original angle to that trope.
Yeah, and the kind of similar thing happened to me when my book was coming out. Elizabeth Acevedo's book with the Fire and High had just come out, and I was freaking out. Like, yes, and like calling my agent, going like, "Oh my God, what are we gonna do? They're both food books," and then she's like, "Don't worry, they're completely different. There's nothing to worry about." So yes, make sure you just have an original. Your story is original, and it's a different angle than what's out there. And even if obviously we can't read all the books that are out there, so it just has to be original enough for you. And the most important point from the premise is gut emotional appeal. Does it get readers in the gut? So books, whether you realize it or not, great books are about emotion. They're about making us feel something. They're about connecting us with these human experiences and human connection. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later when we talk about the golden rule of show, don't tell, because it's all about emotion. But a great book makes you feel.
And I see we have a question from Richard, but I'm not sure I understand the question. Is the
I
story
know, I saw it
from the photosynthesis of the bisector? So Richard, feel free to elaborate so we can
yes,
try to answer.
That went completely
but
over
we'll
my
keep
head.
going because maybe the answer will be on one of these slides.
And I want to say, so from our poll, 28% of you are 8th grade and under. 57% are from 9th to 10th grade, and 14% are 11th to 12th grade. If there's some of you who are in college, please let us know. We would love to know if you're out there as well. We didn't put that in the poll. And please put your questions in the chat box. We'd love to answer your questions.
And here I'm going to put out a question for you guys too to see if anybody gets the answer. What's the difference between story and plot? Let's see if you guys know that, because I actually just learned this past year. So, but I'll give you an answer that I was given.
So I have read like a million craft books, because I pretty much taught myself to write fiction through reading books. So yeah, I'm very well prepared to answer that question. Okay, so elements of story. Let's talk about just overall elements, characters, your setting, which is your place and time, your conflict, whether it's internal conflict or external conflict, your theme. We talked about the theme already. But also within those elements, there are three levels of when the story needs to work, right? One of it is the plot. So that's like overarching, like the overarching story, where the story starts and where it's going. Then on individual scenes, so that's where that plot is actually happening and where the changes in the story are taking place. And line by line, so that's what it's called, micro tension. So yeah, so line by line, you're basically trying to keep the tension in like every line of dialogue, every line of narration. What's your take on that, Ismail?
Yeah, I would say, and also that your tone is set by the line by line. I'll jump in and say something. I had the great fortune to take a writer's sort of session with Gary D. Schmidt, who's the author of most recently Orbiting Jupiter, which is one of my most favorite books. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it yet. It's pretty short. And Gary D. Schmidt is an amazing writer because he's so precise with his words. His books don't have a lot of words, but especially Orbiting Jupiter, it's just so full of tone. And when you're reading it, you just the sentences convey the feeling of the scene, of what is going on. And in this writing session, he was talking about tone, and he gave an example of, I want you guys to write a scene. I want you to write a paragraph, and it's taking place. It's a soldier on a battlefield at the end of the battle, and the soldier's walking across the battlefield. And I want you to write it initially that the character is angry, and then when you get to the middle of the paragraph, I want you to change the tone and make it that the character is, a little frightened. And then at the end, I want that the character to feel hopeless. And then he gave an example that he did, which was, of course, so much more masterful than everybody else in the room. But it was, it's like the soldier stomps on the rigid stalks of grass, just your choice of verbs and your choice of showing how the character is moving conveys the tone that you're trying to, put into your writing, so that the reader just absorbs it without even knowing. So basically, by reading about the character doing something else, like walking across, you can, okay, the character is angry. The soldier's angry. He doesn't have to say that the soldier's angry, because that's bad writing. That'd be boring. The idea is for the reader to visualize in their mind what the character is doing, so that they understand what the character is feeling.
Yeah, which is part of the show Don't Tell that we're gonna get to in a little bit. Another element of story that is super, super important is your voice. And finding your voice can be a little bit hard, because it's something that it's almost it's elusive, right? Like, I remember the first time that somebody told me, oh, your voice is not, when I started, this is when I started writing maybe fiction, maybe 8 years ago. The first thing that I wrote, I showed it to a couple of people, and they were like, oh, your voice is not strong enough. And I'm like, what does that mean, that my voice is not strong enough? Like, can you see?
That's very unhelpful.
I know, but they love the writing. They were like, your writing is great. Your writing is super polished, but you still haven't found your voice. I'm like, well, how do I find my voice? So for me, that meant trying to find something that I was passionate about writing, and two, writing stuff in a way that fit my personality and fit who I am. So writing in a particular way that, I guess, a little bit, I think when I play with it, a little bit mimicked the way I talked and the way I thought about things and my view of the world. And I was trying to put that into the writing. How did you find your voice in your writing?
I would say I don't even know how I would describe my voice. My husband has said that my writing has a very distinct flavor to it, which I don't even know what that means either. But my first book is called Water and May. It's about a 15-year-old Dominican American girl who wants more than anything to have a baby, so someone in her family will finally love her. Oh, so that character came like fully formed in my mind because I took care of lots of young women who were in a similar situation when I was working up in Washington Heights in New York City. And so her want is she wants to have a baby. So someone will love her, but her need is to realize that she doesn't need somebody to love her. She has to love herself. Right? She has to learn to do that before she can take care of herself. And she has to realize that she has to take care of this baby. But so the voice of that character, and so I've written books in first person point of view. Mm-hmm. So just to touch, voice is a little bit different from point of view. Voice is sort of like the flavor of your writing, as I mentioned before. Yeah. So like writers that I can think of, like anybody like Maggie Stiefvater, love her. She has a very distinct way of writing. It's kind of, especially her more recent works tend to be a little bit more, I don't want to say kooky or eccentric, but she surprises you with her writing. Like she does really cool stuff, and you're reading, you're like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I never would have thought that was going to happen, or that this person was going to say that, but it's really cool. So she's developed a very distinct voice. I think Laini Taylor has a very distinct voice too. She's very almost lyrical in the way that she writes. I love her. I love her. Yes. And but it depends also like the point of view that you're using. Because if you're writing in first person point of view, you're writing as if you are the character. And so I think that the voices in my different published novels are different because they're different characters almost. Or they are different characters.
And I love this, what Aileen says here on the chat. She says, they say your voice should be able to stand out and people should know it's you without even looking at the author. I think that's great. That's a great thing to aspire to with your voice. Like it's very much a part. It's almost like your personality in writing, and that you have reached that level of comfort that you know who you are, you love who you are. It's just perfect. And then you're using that in your story to create worlds, to create characters, and it just comes through.
But I wouldn't get too hung up on it though. I would just make sure that you have the correct voice for whatever character you're writing now, and whether it's in first person or third person, where you're showing, different characters, their inside thoughts. Make sure that that's authentic and relatable and hooks your reader, and then then the voice will come basically.
And it takes a long time. I mean, it took me years to develop like a voice on paper that I felt was me. Years. So it does voice actually. I think it's the one thing that takes the longest out of the whole process. So let's talk a little bit about character.
Wait, let me answer the story versus plot. So the story is basically like what happens to the characters. And the plot is how you reveal what happens to the characters to your readers. So I mentioned Laini Taylor, for instance. I don't know how many have read Daughter of Smoke and Moan, one of my favorite books.
Oh, it's awesome. I love that book.
Her plotting is very unique, right? You like start one place and then you go back in time, and then you sort of get a hint of who the characters are, but you don't even know that they're the same characters at first because of the whole reincarnation thing. I hope I'm not spoiling. But the way that she plots her story is very original. And it's very fresh. Another example would be an adult book called Welcome to the Goon Squad, which it was just that the plotting in that book was crazy. It was almost like a collection of short stories, but each character ends up being related to each other, and you don't know that till the end. And she also, Jennifer Egan is the author. Jennifer Egan alternates her types of point of view. She even has a chapter that's done as a PowerPoint presentation, which is crazy. And she has second person point of view, where the whole chapter is you got up in the morning and then you had coffee and then you went outside. And what is so funny is I remember reading that book. I read through it so quickly. I was so invested in figuring out what was going on and who the characters were. It didn't even cross my mind that there was a chapter in there in a second person point of view. And then somebody told me, and I had to go back and look at that chapter. I said, oh my gosh, look at that. She did it so well. I was so hooked. I wasn't even paying attention to her methods. So that's awesome. Really what plotting is. How you reveal your story.
I haven't read A Visit from the Goon Squad. I'm going to have to read that.
It's an old one. It's definitely an adult book though. So
for me, plot versus story, basically plot is just it's what's happening in this in the short story or book, and story is the internal journey of the character. That's how I define it for myself, just very simply. So speaking of characters, let's talk about how to do a very simple character sketch. And we have some questions here on the slide that will guide you. And you just have to think, what does this character want? What did they need? How are their wants and need and conflict? Conflict is at the heart of every great story. How does their past play into their present wants and needs? So what is some of the backstory? And you can lay out in the sketch, you can lay out all the backstory, even if you don't use it in your story, in the actual story later. And what is their wound? So Isma, you call it the wound. I call it the brokenness.
Yeah, I wasn't the one who used that term initially, but another author did, and I thought it resonated with me, so I'm sharing it with you guys. It's sort of like, what is, usually something has happened to your protagonist, or often it's early in life, it doesn't have to be, but it's a formative event. Something has happened and it really shapes their belief in the world, in themselves, and also it explains why they want what they want, even though it might not be what they need. Because oftentimes the characters are oblivious as to what it is they truly need, because their belief is telling them, I want this, I want this.
So Lisa Cron, who wrote the book Story Genius, she actually calls it the origin story. The origin story. I think it's a great way to put it. And the example that we have is in the Hunger Games. So think of Katniss Everdeen, right? What does she want? So Katniss wants to stay at home and keep her sister safe. Why does she want this? Because it is revealed to us, and this is her origin story, is that her dad died in the mines. And when that happened, her mom had an emotional breakdown and she had to jump in to take care of her sister. So in Katniss's heart and mind, she is the primary caretaker of her sister. So that right there is an inherent conflict with what's going on in her world, which is the reaping is coming in. And we know there's tension from the page 1 in that book. There is tension. So what Katniss wants is in an absolute conflict with what's going on and the plot that's going on in her world. And
because what does Katniss need to do? She needs to become the face of the revolution, right? She needs to lead the revolution against the regime.
Yes,
and her origin story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And her origin story also explains why she's so distrustful of authority, right? Authority figures, because her parents let her down.
And why she's so distrustful of Peeta, who is the love interest. We find out from the origin story also that Peeta also let her down. And Eileen also says, I appreciate the titles you'll share because I always want to know what writers are reading. And we want to know what you guys are reading. So
tell us your favorite book. Share.
Yes, and let us know your books or what are you reading right now, or some stuff that you're excited about reading. And we are going to move on to the next slide. So action plot versus emotional plot. Do you want to start on this one, Ismail?
Yeah, so this is important. So this, so again, I usually start with a character. I think of a character and like what their central conflict is and how they need to change. So this is another thing. A lot of, I've heard a lot of authors say, a lot of best-selling authors say that in order to engage the reader has to connect with the character on the emotional level. So even though they're, let's say it's the movie about, trying to think of a good blockbuster movie, because I do this all the time with my family and they're always like, stop it, Mom, you're ruining you're like deconstructing it all for us. But I'm like Independence Day, that movie, which is really old now, but with Will Smith, right? It's like you're drawn into the action plot of what's going on and they're fighting the aliens. But what makes you connect with that character is, what's going on internally with them. Like, what are they dealing with emotionally? And so every character should have an action plot and as well as an emotional plot. And so let me think of another good example. So, well, we can just take Katniss, right? So her action plot is she has to survive. Like, she gets pulled into the Hunger Games and she has to survive the Hunger Games, right? That's her action plot. She has to figure out, and her emotional plot is basically she's been relying on herself, her entire life, right? Because everybody
Yeah.
she knows lets her down. But in order to win the Hunger Games, she actually has to work with other people. So that's her emotional plot of realizing that it's okay to ask for help and get help from other people. And so at the end, so here's another point. Your character doesn't always have to change, but your character has to realize that a change is needed. And then they can either decide to change or they can decide not to. And then your story ends on sort of like a tragic note. So
Well,
not all stories show like a positive change, for instance. I guess they all change, but it's not always in the positive direction. You can have a negative change where they're like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to stick with my ways of being difficult. Or,
but and this is an important point to make, and it's that the character needs to realize that they need to change in order to get what they want. That change is needed so they can achieve their goal. So what they're doing, they get to the point that they realize that what they're doing is not working anymore for them. And in order to achieve their goal, if they continue the way that they're doing things, it's just not going to work. Like, you know, sticking with the Katniss example, she realizes that she's got to start looking out for others. And in order to win, she's got to pair up with Peeta. That's a huge turning point for her internal character development. So
and she's
you
got to
know,
let
they're
other
both,
people in. She's got to care
yes,
about them.
she does. And the external plot and the emotional plot, they're just basically going hand in hand. They're working together to kind of develop the story.
Yeah, and in the Hunger Games, it's almost cheating because we have Hamish, right? He's telling the reader what she
Yeah.
needs to do. But remember, and he's like, you need to show emotion, right? That's her
Yes.
thing. She has to become a more like compassionate,
Exactly.
visibly compassionate, caring person. That is her emotional journey.
And I have to say, Ismail, I am so impressed by these books, this list of books that you guys are reading. Like Sophie, War and Peace. I tried reading some Tolstoy, and it was just
I
so
love Anna
painful. I
Karenina.
mean,
I've not read
yes.
War and Peace yet.
So we
I don't
talked
know A
about
Tale for
this.
the Time Being. I want to read that
Okay,
one. I
so
love
Ismail
everything.
actually talk about the Anna Karenina because I hated Anna Karenina. I was
Oh, I
just like,
love
oh my
that
god,
book.
just killed her already, and she
I love it.
loved it. I
I know
hate.
it's true. I'm like, that's my favorite book of all times.
Oh
And she's
yeah,
like,
I thought
my
funny.
least favorite book of all times is Anna Karenina.
That is
So
so funny. Yeah, and I read some of these. Jackie Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass. I loved that book. That was
Meg
such a good
Medina's awesome.
Yeah, Meg Medina's awesome. I read
The
everything. The
Hate You
Hate You
Give, I love that.
Give.
I read it, I
They,
listened to it, saw the movie. I mean,
I know they give her Sasha's reading Game of Thrones, which is amazing. Mistborn. I'm gonna have to check that out. There's some great titles here. Love it. Okay, so let's move on, and we're gonna
oh,
talk
and so
now
I'll
about
interject because we sort of brought it up a little bit. So Myra and I have very different opinions about Anna Karenina. But so that just also goes to show you when you're writing, somebody else told me this recently, and I think it was a good piece of advice. You're not going to please everybody with your writing, and your writing is not
yeah,
necessarily for everyone, for every reader. There
correct.
are some readers that like certain types of stories, and your story may or may not be that for that person. And so keep that in mind, especially in the beginning of your writing,
Yeah.
adventures, because you're going to be asking people to give you feedback, and some of the feedback might not be great, like for you to hear, but so it's important to take feedback and to take what you can from the feedback to make your work stronger and better, but also always realize that not every story is for every reader. That's what I want.
Yes, and and we're gonna talk about this a little bit later, but criticism, getting feedback and criticism is just, if you're gonna write, that's just, it comes with the territory, unfortunately. Okay, so let's talk about the golden rule: show, don't tell, because
Wait, so
this
can
is
you guys
so
all just
important.
respond yes or no if you've heard of this before? Show, don't tell.
So yes, let us know.
Has
Like,
anyone heard this phrase before? Because I heard it when after I had written my very first manuscript and was trying to get it published and trying to figure out like how you get a manuscript published. And one of my author friends told this to me. She's like, oh, just show, don't tell. And I was like, what does that even mean? Because your whole story, like the form of writing words down and having people reading it, you're telling them the story. It's not like you're a cinematographer and you're having your people walking around and people are watching. And so I found it very difficult to sort of grasp what that meant. But so it seems like a lot of
So
people have heard of
I
it.
know. I love that you guys
That's
are pretty
good.
much most of you
You're
have
probably
heard
like,
this
we know what
because
this
I know,
means. We
like
do, but
whatever, ladies. Like so yeah, so hopefully we can tell you something that will, help what you already know. So it's narrative versus immediate scene, right?
I'm laughing at Iris's comment.
So I
Literally every
know. That's
day,
great.
my creative
I
writing
know.
teacher says this.
So what is show don't tell? So basically it means that instead of you narrating and telling the reader what they need to know for the plot and story to advance, you're showing it in an immediate scene. So the events are occurring as they happen rather than being described. And the important factor about showing and the construction of scenes that people just can't that people absolutely love and they need to continue reading is emotion. There needs to be an emotional hook, an emotional undercurrent, and that's when, going back to when I talked about those three levels of story, that's where your attention, your line by line tension comes in, because you're using every line in that scene is building up some kind of emotional tension that is grabbing the reader and pushing him forward in the story. And another thing to remember is try to engage all of the senses. You're when you're using descriptions, try to keep it very textured so people are in the moment, and in the scene, people can feel the room. One of the things that I get a lot, one of the comments that I get a lot in my book is that they feel that they're in the kitchen, that they're eating the food
It makes
because the
me hungry.
descriptions.
Yeah, reading
What?
your book, I was hungry the entire time. I was like, where's the food? I'm so hungry. I want to eat all this food that she's making
I
right now.
know. I get that a lot. Like that is probably the biggest thing that I get from people when, like, in reviews and that kind of thing, is just like, "Oh my God, like her descriptions of food are amazing. Like I felt that I was in the kitchen. I was hungry all the time." So that's because I'm using trying to engage all of the senses when I'm working on the scene. And as you get better in your writing, you're going to resist the urge to explain, because and you trust that the reader is going to get what they need from the scene that you have built.
Right.
Uh, and setting descriptions, that also includes keeping things tight. For example, not going overboard with setting descriptions and long paragraphs describing a room or describing something in the story, and keeping your dialogue beats. And is making you explain what dialogue beats are, just very
Yeah.
concise.
So, dialogue, sometimes, especially I see this a lot in a lot of first drafts that I read with my writing critique group. The dialogue reads like from a screenplay or from a play, like a script, where it's just like, so and so says this, so and so says this, blah, blah, blah. It's better if you can give some clues to the reader to show what the characters are doing while they're having the conversation. So whether it's, they're walking down the streets, the sidewalks of New York City, and a taxi comes by and they get splashed by a puddle, or maybe somebody is taking a shower and having a conversation with like their mother, and their phone is on the counter. I just finished one of Sarah J. Maas's books this morning, and that was happening. And so there's the beats of, she says something to the mother, so and so said, quotes, blah 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 blah, and then she puts the shampoo in her hand and is shampooing. So those are things to just break up the dialogue in a way that allows the reader to really visualize the scene. And I wanted to just make 2 points about the show Don't Tell. So this is a good example. I think there are 3 points actually. One is, and Myra already astutely alluded to this, you don't want to assume that your reader, you don't want to dumb anything down for your reader. You have to trust your readers that they're going to understand what you're doing without having to spoon feed them. So don't only give them enough. Don't give them too much, or else they'll get annoyed with you. And so that goes into you don't want to say, so-and-so was angry. That you want to show what that character is doing so that the reader can infer that what the emotional experience is of the character. And so there's the 2 things of the show don't tell. One is the emotion, right? So you have to show the emotion of the character through their actions or their dialogue, so that the reader understands what the character's feeling without the character thinking, oh, I'm feeling really bummed right now. You don't want to do that. And then the other part of the show don't tell is the actual action. So like this is a good example here with the cat. So you want it to be sort of almost like visceral enough that somebody reading it can really picture it in their minds.
Yeah, you're there. You're in that space. You're hearing, in this example, you're hearing the tap 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 of the little paw on the window. You're hearing you're imagining the hummingbird outside fluttering. There's several emotional and texture things in that description that put you in that place.
Exactly. And then another little tidbit, because this is what really I think nailed it for me, the whole show don't tell. And maybe it's because I'm also a physician, but I remember reading like 15 years ago, there's a lot of research on memory neurons. So they would do these experiments, right? So you have a monkey and there are two monkeys and they're both they're having like functional MRI or EEGs done in their brain. So they're measuring the brain activity and they give one of the monkeys a banana and the other monkey is watching monkey with banana eat said banana, and both parts of their brain will flash up. So it's as if they're both eating the banana, even though they're not. One's watching the other one eating the banana and is triggering the same parts of the brain as if that monkey is also eating the banana.
Yeah, and that also happens when we read fiction. Yes, but it's the same thing when we read fiction. When your brain cannot tell the difference between like fiction and reality. So when you're reading great fiction, your brain is actually activating the same parts as if that was actually happening to you.
Yeah, you're feeling. You want to feel the emotions. Basically, you want your readers to have their heart race when they're reading like Stephen King. Come on.
Yes.
You're reading Stephen King. Yeah. I'm never reading Stephen King alone by myself like in a dark house at night. No, I can't do that. I will drive myself crazy because I get so like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Like you just can feel the emotion of the character. That's
and if you have
like showing, it's like you want to transfer that to your reader.
If you can think of right now, like of some examples of a great scene that you read in a book, or a great character, or a moment that you read that you were like, oh my God, it was like I got like either I got jumpy or I got excited or my heart rate was, my heart was racing. We would love to hear what was that book, what was the scene, what was going on. And then now we're going to talk a little bit about journaling and how it can help you become a better writer and a better writer for fiction, how it can help you find your voice, and how it can help you find that story that only you can tell and that you are passionate about. So one of the things, and actually, Isma, this was your idea about writing something mundane.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about the reference that I did with Gary D. Schmidt about conveying tone and conveying the emotion that the character's feeling through the tone of the words that you select. So, and I've also had a lot of in these other writers conferences where they'll say things like, okay, I want you to write this scene, but from the points of view of the different characters in the room, and each point of view should be slightly different because the characters are obviously seeing the action and they're, through their own lens of their own wound or in their own conflict of what are they trying to get. And so you could do something it's a good writing prompt for anybody.
Yeah, so I like the idea of like taking something mundane, like when we were talking about it, we gave the example of like going to get coffee and then the coffee spills, and then using that something that happens.
I forgot that.
Something
I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, every day, and then writing about that in a way that is unique, that stands out, and that shows what the character is. Yeah,
so Arthur Levine is a very famous editor, publisher. He's got like Arthur Levine books. He's a pretty important person. I went into a room with him with like a bunch of other writers, and he was giving like just a short example of, I can tell you guys that this morning I went to the coffee shop in the lobby of the Grand Hyatt and I got myself a coffee, and then I came and now I'm sitting here. He's like, that doesn't tell you very much about me as a person, right? He said, or I could tell you that I ran into the coffee shop because I was dying because I really need my cup of coffee. And I asked for like a half calf double shot of foam latte and I need it with sweet and low, but they didn't have sweet and low. And I was so angry because I said NutraSweet is not right. And then as I was going to find what other sugar substitute they had, somebody spilled tea on my foot and I yelled at that person. And, so he just elaborated and he gave these very specific, very kind of quirky details to the whole exchange that, his point was it makes you really understand the character better if you really invest in these very fine details.
So, I mean, it's just a great way for you to really practice that show, don't tell technique, and also using how to make the mundane magical, right? How to take mundane moments, because really stories all have like these mundane moments. It's the way that they're written and the way that they carry emotion and that they carry a theme that makes them that makes them memorable. So you can practice using that. Another good thing to ask, and I shared with everybody these prompts, they're in a document that just went out, is what is something unique, unusual about my life? We all have things that are unique and unusual. It doesn't matter how boring you think your life is.
And
we all have stuff that.
Here's another tip. It doesn't have to be you. Pick somebody else. Pick your like cookie friend or like Aunt Gladys. Like, and think about those people. Because I remember, here's another funny thing. Henry Winkler is actually an author. And his tip, when I went to hear him speak, he said, steal from everybody. He's like, they're never going to know it's them. He's like, my mom never knew I was writing about her. He's like, all her little quirks and ticks, because she's unaware of them. That's the whole point. But he's like, you just steal it for your characters.
I have like really my grandparents are in my book. My neighbors are in my book. Like there's like a ton of people who I run into they don't have to know. Another idea for your journaling. So what experience have I had or have others had that are relatable, things that others can relate to? What is an event that has changed the way I see the world or that has changed the way that I relate to others? What am I passionate about? And what do I love to read and why? And that was a big thing when I was deciding what to write, is what do I love to read? Like I love romantic comedies right now. I have a stack of rom-coms that I'm going through because, we're home and I just need something hopeful and uplifting. Another thing that I love to read is fantasy. I love fantasy. My first manuscript is fantasy, and I'm hoping I can go back to writing fantasy at some point soon. So, it's important that you want to read the story that you write, that you want to read it a million times, because as you edit and as you rewrite, you're going to read that same story again and again and again. So if you don't like it, like, how do you expect other people to want to read it, right?
So Loverly has a question. All stories have moments that are more critical than others. So showing and not telling would be best reserved for when you really want to slow the pace down. Yes, otherwise the book would get nowhere fast. I think editors would tell you should very rarely be telling. I mean, telling is really sort of exposition. It's when the character is telling the reader something that happened in the past. Otherwise, if it's something that's happening in real time on the page, you should be using, you should be throwing out all your guns to show it happening instead of telling it happening. Not like, the building fell down or the person felt sad. You have to show them feeling sad, and you don't have to just say the building fell down. The building collapsed with this loud noise of thundering and people were running and screaming. And some of that stuff, is going to be changed by your editor along the way anyway. Like, so I can give you some examples from This Train Is Being Held. There were a couple of scenes where my editor came back and said, I want to see this in dialogue. Don't, because the dialogue is more showing instead of telling. Give me the dialogue. So I had to rewrite, I think, 2 scenes and do it all dialogue instead of, and I had sort of said what had happened.
Yeah, the times that I use narration are when I just need to give readers some information that is important to the story. Sometimes is a little bit of backstory or some detail about the workings. For example, in Salty Bittersweet, about the workings of the Michelin star program and how does that work. So I wrote one or two paragraphs of
right.
how was that. So in those instances, I feel like you have to use narration in order to explain. But really, when I think of narration, is using it sparingly to help the reader along to follow the story. And whatever you write, it has to fit. It has to have the same style, the same tone as the scene. Otherwise, it's gonna pull the reader out of the scene and out of the page.
Beware the info dump, right?
Yes,
it's very commonly seen in I wouldn't say published works, but in a lot of drafts, especially if it's a world that is a fantasy world. There seems to be like a lot of dumping of like, this is how the world works in the beginning, and you can't do that. You have to show how the world works by showing action, showing the characters going through their conflicts, and the responses to whatever it is that they're doing. It's tricky.
And let's talk a little bit about fan fiction, because this is just an easy way for you guys to practice telling stories, because you're using other people's worlds. And I really, really, really want to know if you guys have written fan fiction. Where have you published it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Have you just tried to stay away for whatever reason? So please give us your we want to know what your experience has been with fan fiction. So basically, fan fiction is a story that is set in someone else's fictional universe, whether it be film, TV, books, or games. In the world of fan fiction, readers ask that you stay true to the canon, and you just basically have to start. You just have to write. Start with something that you know. I do want to give some words of caution. If you're publishing in some of these fan fiction sites, don't use your real name, your age, or your location. And just if anyone in a weird way kind of reaches out with inappropriate messages, just alert your parent or guardian and ignore nasty comments, because I think that's something that also happens in a lot of these fan fiction sites. It's like people can be a little bit just brutal in their comments instead of supportive. So yes, that's I love what I would love to hear your experiences and what have you guys done with like fan fiction. But it is a great way to kind of get your feet wet.
And it's a great way to practice too, because it's some of the harder elements of the writing, meaning the story, the characters have already been developed for you. You can just practice the mechanics of writing, like how am I going to tell this story, because I already have this character. And usually it's funny it's not funny, it's obvious that the fan fiction people pick have very strong characters that the readers really identify with, and every reader thinks that they really know that character. They know them like their best friend or their brother or their sister, so they can write as if they're that character. So I think it's a good thing to try.
And in that same vein, let's talk about how you can get your work seen. And please let us know, have you published some of your work? Where have you published it? What was your experience? I know I see that Yvonette, she writes some fan fiction on Wattpad as some practice, which is great. Sophie has written a lot of fan fiction but never published. So let us know if you're publishing in other spaces. Some of the spaces that we recommend, for example, an easy one, which I did when I was in high school, was to publish on your school's newspaper, if you have one, or newsletter. Or start your own writers group. You can start your own critique group and then share your writing with other peers and people who are like-minded and who are also interested in writing. This can be either physically with people in your community or online. We also recommend writing conferences. For example, like SCBWI has a great writing conference, and they also have a team program.
That stands for the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators.
Correct. And then, entering your stuff and writing contests and magazines. These two websites have a ton of resources. Newpages.com, they have a section for your writer's guide, and tellingroom.org has a whole youth publishing section. Eileen has a great point. Start building your platform on Instagram and Twitter. If you see yourself becoming a professional author, future author, this is super important. Like,
Yeah,
they publishers
start blogging now.
Mhm.
Get your
Publishers
audience.
want to see that you have a platform, so it is a big deal. You can also try platforms like Wattpad, Teen Ink, and NaNoWriMo has a young writers program that is also excellent. Has anybody participated in NaNoWriMo? I would love to know.
I've never done it. Do you guys know what that is? It's like National Novel Writing Month. So it's
Yeah.
usually November, and everybody who wants to write decides that they're going to spend that whole month and they're going to try and just spit out an entire novel in 1 month. And there's a lot of support online. People say, I wrote 2,000 words today. And I'm always like, oh my gosh, that's such a lot. That's great. I also want to add that if you are a genre writer, so let's say you're writing science fiction or romance, not young adults, because just because you are young adults doesn't mean you have to write young adult. Maybe you're writing a different genre. Seek out some online resources for that, and they will have writing membership groups like SCBWI that you can join, and then you can hear about their writers conferences, for instance, and attend them. And there are a lot of things that happen online. I mean, right now everything's online, obviously, but there is a lot online, because, and you're going to want to make sure that you're familiar with the rules of your genre. Mystery writers, romance, sci-fi, like I said before, they all have very specific rules that need to be followed, and I don't know what those are, but if you want to write that in those genres, you need to know what they are. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to follow all the rules, but you need to know what the rules are so that when you choose to break them, it's for sort of like an element of originality or surprise.
So, and Iris has a great suggestion. She says to try the Scholastic Art and Writing
Oh
Awards.
yeah, it's
That
good
sounds
too.
amazing.
Scholastic is great. And I wrote
Yeah,
down
Scholastic.
swoon reads. It's so funny because I couldn't find it. I thought it was spoon reads, which is something different. Swoon reads was started, the background of that. So what it is it's an online way that you can put up a manuscript and get feedback, sort of crowdsourced. Lots of people will be able to read it and they'll give you feedback. And if a lot of people read it and like it, so it's run by Fywell and Friends, then they'll publish it. They'll buy it from you. So you don't need an agent.
That's
You just
awesome.
put it up. I think there's some criterion, like if you submit your manuscript on Swoon Reads, it's mostly for romance, I think young adult romance, then your manuscript cannot be out on submission with an agent or other editors, and they reserve the right to keep it on their website for 6 months. But the reason that it was made was because Gene Fywell, who's another one of those sort of like luminary editors, like super important, makes a lot of the publishing decisions, was frustrated because it seemed like there were books coming out that were self-published that nobody had heard of, and all of a sudden they were bestsellers. And so these were authors who were unable to take the traditional route of finding an agent and then signing with an agent and then having that agent sell to an editor. So they were just doing it on their own online digitally, and finding masses of people who loved their stories. And so this is an attempt for the traditional publishers to have an outlet for people who maybe aren't ready or are nervous to do the full traditional route.
And didn't like Sarah J. Maas started on Wattpad?
I think so, or maybe it was a predecessor to Wattpad, but she definitely did something like that. And you know who else did? Rainbow Rowell did tons of fan fiction, as did Cassandra Clare. They started out writing lots of Harry Potter fan fiction.
Yeah, and look at where they are now.
I think that's what I heard. Some of them might have told me, but.
So guys, we want to give you some advice, and this are kind of like things that we have learned along
in our
the
last
way.
few minutes.
Yes, and please, if you have any questions, get them in now. We're gonna answer all your questions before we log off. But we definitely want to leave you with some just a very important advice that will help you along your writing journey. One is that dealing with rejection. Rejection sucks. My first manuscript was rejected 200 times by various different agents. My second manuscript, which already had an agent, was also rejected when it went out on submission. And then my third manuscript was the one that actually sold. It sold right away to a large publisher, HarperCollins. So I was like super, super excited. But before that moment happened, there was a ton of soul crushing rejection that I had to deal with. There were a lot of tears too. So it's part of the writing journey. It's part of the publishing journey. If you one day want to be a published author, you have to learn how to deal with rejection in a healthy way. A big thing for me has been having a very supportive community of writers and published authors around me that I can text, that I can call, that I can grab coffee with, and just, you know, we help each other out, we give each other advice, we read each other's stuff, and then as you continue on your journey, you're still supporting each other on whatever stage you are in your career.
Yeah, I would echo that. And then the other thing is that, so I hope that we've given you some tips that are helpful, some things maybe you have heard before. Clearly everybody already had heard about show, don't tell. And some things maybe are new, but remember to keep in mind that there is no magic formula. If there were a magic formula, if there were one book that if you read that book and it told you how, and it says, this is how you plot, that if you read it, you'd have a bestseller, then everybody would have bestsellers, which is not true. I've been to a lot of writing conferences where most of the question, when, you know, it's an agent or an editor who's hosting the meeting, and they're bombarded with questions along the lines of, what type of story are you looking for? What type of characters, what types of conflict? What do you, and usually they respond with, you know, they might have some specific genre things, like they might say, I'm not buying picture books right now. I'm only interested in young adults. But by and large, their responses are, write what you're passionate about, because we don't know what we're looking for until it hits us in the face, until we read it and then we say, this is what I'm looking for, because it's got to be somewhat original and it's got to have your own passion. So search for the story that only you can tell, or that you're the only one who can tell it right, or you know how to tell it in a different way. Because I think the world likes originality, right? Likes the surprises, and definitely that's what the editors and agents seem to be wanting.
And we love passionate people. On Instagram, we're on Twitter. You can also send us questions via our website. We'll be happy to stay in touch. And very important, Isme and I are going to be hosting a live book club and author Q&A. This is on Thursday, April 16th at 4 p.m. Yes, it's next Thursday. So please join us for that.
Read our books, but
and they're fast readers. And if you read our books and if you liked our books, leave a review on Amazon or Goodreads. We love reviews, especially we love great reviews. So yes, if you have the time to read our books and want to join the chat, we'd love to have you. And we have a ton of webinars in Las Musas website. So swing by the Las Musas website and check out some of the other webinars. There's some great discussions.
We even have, so most of our webinars are recorded, and so you can even watch one at your own leisure that's already been recorded. So for instance, if you are a fantasy writer and you're interested in world building, we have one of those. There's one specifically for LGBTQ writing that's coming up, or there was one about transitioning from writing adult fiction to young adult fiction. There's a lot, and there will be more coming as everybody tries to connect and engage online and with readers. And so I hope this was helpful. Thank you for your attention.
Guys, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you today, and everybody stay safe and take care. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Bye.
Bye.